When should that lockdown end? Do you want that to end straight away, a form of it straight away? Do you want the full works for a few more weeks? Let's speak with Brendan O'Neill, editor of Spiked Online. Afternoon, Brendan.
Hi.
I know you've talked about this a fair bit in terms of whether it's an overreaction, whether it's the right reaction, whether it can carry on like this. I mean, the one thing we do know is that many more months in the current condition would have utterly devastating effects for this country and beyond.
Yes, many more months, I think, would be completely unsustainable. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that that would give rise to a human disaster, because the economic costs of that would be just immeasurable. And we're already seeing experts predicting that this could, if the lockdown goes on much longer, it could cause one of the worst economic contractions in the UK since 1900. You know, really only second to the Great Depression in terms of the effect on jobs and wages and economic life more broadly. So I don't have a crystal ball, and as people keep telling me, I'm not an expert, so I can't say what's the best date to end the lockdown. But what I can say is we absolutely should be talking every single day about the desirability of ending the lockdown and how quickly we can do that so that we don't cause an economic catastrophe.
Yeah, I mean, we keep being told, though, of course, anytime anyone raises these issues, Brendan, we are told consistently, we hear nurses say it, doctors say it, you can't tinker with the lockdown. It's the only way to stop it spreading. And if we do compromise, dilute, or in any way change what we're doing, we will see death rates shoot up. I mean, what is the payoff here? And is it a payoff that we're talking about?
You know, I really don't like the idea that there's a trade-off to be made. You know, one thing that's really annoyed me, in fact, about our society over the past few years is the ageism and the absolute hatred we've seen for older people, particularly, in fact, during the Brexit era, where we were told that old voters were stupid and racist and had destroyed this country. And there were even jokes being made about old voters dying off and eventually we'll have a Remainer majority. So I've always found that kind of stuff deeply, deeply ugly. And I think whether you are 19 years old or 90 years old, this society should do everything it can to save your life. That, to me, is completely unquestionable. So it's not about trade-offs as such. What it is about is taking a broader picture about what needs to be done for the health of society. Now, we could have had a more surgical strike against this virus. We could have isolated the elderly, protected the vulnerable, do everything in our power to ensure that as few of them as possible contracted the virus, while allowing healthier, younger people to carry on working. So there were other options. I'm not convinced that completely shutting down economic life was the only choice we had. And we know that Sweden, for example, is trying something a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, Sweden, though, I was going to mention Sweden, Brendan, but suggestions that their death rate is going up because they are trying something different.
Well, you know, it's a difficult situation. I mean, one view I have, and I know that there are some experts who share this view, that's where I got it from, is that you can't lock a virus away. I mean, we really do have to face up to this fact. We have to face up to the fact that this novel new virus, which is pretty lethal in older and vulnerable people, and, you know, mostly asymptomatic or mild in younger, healthier people. When a virus like this comes along, you can't just lock it away behind a closed door and then think that it will never come back. It will come back. So one of the other discussions we need to start having now, when we start easing the lockdown, I think there will come a second wave, and maybe then in winter, when things get colder and people get a bit ill, there could be another wave, and it could be a pretty bad one. We do have to brace ourselves for the fact that we will be living with this virus until we have a vaccine and until we understand it in more depth. So when I hear some experts say we have to shut society down, keep the lockdown in place, or severe social distancing for 12 months or 18 months, that to me sounds incredibly sinister, because the economic consequences of that would be just too horrific to think about, not just for the UK, but for the third world too, where I think there will be a massive economic contraction which could cause great, great harm.
So to use that slightly annoying phrase, is the lockdown, do you think, slightly about the optics from a government perspective?
I think it is partly about optics. I think, I really dislike the Boris bashing that we've seen in recent weeks. I think he's actually trying incredibly hard, and I think he's going through a really rough period at the moment. So I would never blame this on Boris, but I do think that the government has buckled to a certain extent to this extraordinary pressure that was coming. A lot of it was coming from the media class, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. And it was also about being seen to do what other nations had done as well. So I think there was a lot of optics. I think the danger is it could have economic consequences. It could also have consequences for our liberty. And I think one of the things that's starting to irritate large numbers of people about the lockdown is, I'm afraid to say, the behaviour of the police. We now have police threatening to search our shopping trolleys, taking drone footage of people walking in the Peak District, arresting people for sitting on park benches. I think one of the other sad things about the lockdown is that it has drawn out this kind of petty authoritarianism that has existed in our society. And some police forces, not all of them, some police forces seem to be relishing their new powers. So what I would say is we don't want to come out of this process economically weakened, less liberal and less democratic, because then that would raise the question, well, why did we fight the virus in the first place? Surely we're fighting it to preserve life and to preserve the freedoms of our society.
But if you see a couple of octogenarians sitting on a park bench in a threatening manner, Brendan, it's important to pounce, isn't it? That's how we get a civilised society out of this.
Well, I was told off by a policeman for sitting on a park bench and sending a text message in Hyde Park. He rather wittily said to me, "Can I ask you what you're exercising apart from your thumbs?" And it was a
bad
bit
line,
annoying.
frankly.
It was. I'm sure he used it many times that day. It was a good line. It was annoying because I had been exercising for 2 hours. In fact, so I was resting for 2 minutes. I don't want to go down the road of saying we live in a police state or it's just like East Germany in the 1980s or anything like that. But it has drawn out, the curtain twitching sections of society are quite liking this. They're phoning the cops if their neighbour goes for a second run.
Yeah,
there's a pettiness and a mean-spiritedness which is being given licence by this crisis, and the police, I think, have taken licence from it as well. We've got to be really careful that in the great effort that we are making to hold this virus at bay, we don't destroy some of the really good things about British society. That's the thing we've got to watch out for.
Good man, Brendan. Thank you, Brendan O'Neill, editor of Spiked Online. Check them out if you haven't done already. If you want to hear views and voices that depart often from convention and the invariably much worn media line, then Spiked is perhaps where you will find it.